What if I told you there's someone out there who dreams in Icelandic and argues in Mandarin? Or a person who learned to count in Finnish while singing lullabies in Arabic? Growing up bilingual is already fascinating, but when the languages involved are from completely different worlds, the stories become absolutely extraordinary. Today, we're diving into the real experiences of people who grew up speaking language pairs so unusual, you probably never imagined they existed together. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see language and culture in a completely different light. Let's get started. Meet Sarah, who grew up speaking Basque and Japanese. Now, if you're wondering how that combination even happens, you're not alone. Sarah's father is from the Basque country in Spain, and her mother is from Osaka, Japan. They met as graduate students in California, fell in love, and decided to raise their daughter with both of their native languages, despite having virtually nothing in common linguistically. Basque is a language isolate, meaning it has no known relationship to any other language on Earth. Japanese, while not an isolate, belongs to a completely different language family with its own unique writing systems and grammar. Sarah describes her childhood as living between two completely different mental universes. She remembers being 4 years old and realizing that the way her dad described directions and locations was fundamentally different from how her mom did it. In Basque, there's an elaborate system of verb conjugations that mark who's doing what to whom, while Japanese relies heavily on context and particles. Sarah says she would sometimes start a sentence in one language and finish it in another, not because she didn't know the words, but because one language just felt more appropriate for what she was trying to express. Her parents never corrected her. They understood that she was building something unique in her mind, a bridge between two linguistic islands that had never been connected before. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Sarah told me that when she's doing math, she thinks in Japanese. When she's telling stories or being creative, she thinks in Basque. She didn't consciously decide this. Her brain just naturally organized itself that way. Scientists call this cognitive compartmentalization, and it's incredibly common in bilinguals, especially those with unusual language pairs. The languages don't just coexist, they each claim different territories in the mind. But Sarah's story is just the beginning. Let me introduce you to Marcus, who grew up speaking Swahili and Icelandic. His father is from Tanzania, and his mother is from Reykjavik. They met while working for the United Nations and eventually settled in Norway, which meant Marcus actually grew up trilingual, adding Norwegian to the mix. But the Swahili Icelandic combination at home was what shaped his identity. Marcus describes the experience as toggling between two completely different philosophies of life encoded in language. Swahili, he explains, is deeply communal. The language is filled with proverbs about working together, sharing responsibilities, and maintaining social harmony. Icelandic, on the other hand, has this ancient, almost mystical quality to it, preserved from Old Norse. It's a language that feels connected to sagas, to individual heroes, to the harsh beauty of volcanic landscapes. Marcus says that when he speaks Swahili, he feels expansive and connected to everyone around him. When he speaks Icelandic, he feels introspective and deeply aware of nature and history. He's the same person, but the languages activate different aspects of his personality. One of the most touching things Marcus shared was about how he processes emotions. When he's angry, he naturally switches to Swahili because the language has more direct, communal ways of expressing frustration that lead to resolution. When he's melancholy or reflective, Icelandic just flows out of him. His parents never taught him this. The languages themselves seem to have their own emotional territories, and Marcus's brain mapped them without conscious effort. Then there's Amara, who grew up with Finnish and Tamil. Her mother is from Helsinki, her father from Chennai. This combination is particularly fascinating because both languages are complex in completely different ways. Finnish is known for its 15 grammatical cases and vowel harmony. Tamil is a classical Dravidian language with a literary tradition spanning over 2,000 years. Amara jokes that other kids had imaginary friends, but she had imaginary languages. because her brain was so wired for linguistic complexity. What struck me most about Amara's story was how she described the concept of time. In Finnish, the past tense is constructed in a way that feels very definite and completed. In Tamil, there's a more fluid relationship with time, especially in storytelling. Amara says that when she recalls childhood memories, the language she uses actually changes how she remembers events. A memory described in Finnish feels like a closed chapter, while the same memory in Tamil feels more alive and ongoing. This isn't just poetic language. Neuroscientists have actually studied this phenomenon and found that bilinguals often have slightly different autobiographical memories depending on which language they're using. Now let's talk about Diego, who grew up speaking Welsh and Tagalog. His mother is from the Philippines, and his father is from Wales. They met while teaching English in South Korea, of all places, and eventually settled in Cardiff. Diego grew up in a neighborhood where Welsh was everywhere, while Tagalog was the language of home, family gatherings, and video calls with relatives back in Manila. The combination meant Diego had access to two rich poetic traditions that most people never encounter together. What Diego told me about humor was absolutely fascinating. Welsh humor, he says, is often understated and ironic, playing with the sounds and mutations of the language itself. Tagalog humor tends to be more playful with wordplay and puns, often mixing English words in creative ways. Diego developed this unique comedic voice that draws from both traditions, and he says people are always surprised by his perspective because it doesn't fit neatly into either cultural box. He's not Welsh, he's not Filipino, he's something entirely his own, shaped by these two unexpected linguistic worlds. Let me share one more story with you, and this one might be the most unusual of all. Meet Yuki, who grew up speaking Mongolian and Portuguese. Her father is from Ulaanbaatar, her mother from São Paulo. They met as musicians touring in Europe and decided to raise Yuki in Brussels, adding French to her linguistic repertoire. But at home, it was strictly Mongolian with dad and Portuguese with mom. Yuki describes the experience as having two different rhythm systems in her head. Mongolian, she explains, has this flowing horseback quality to it, influenced by centuries of nomadic culture. Portuguese, especially Brazilian Portuguese, is musical and emotional, filled with diminutives and terms of endearment. Yuki says that when she's anxious, she naturally shifts to Mongolian because something about the language's structure calms her down. When she's excited or happy, Portuguese just bursts out of her. She didn't learn this from her parents. The languages themselves carried these emotional frequencies, and her brain tuned into them naturally. What all these stories have in common is something remarkable. These individuals didn't just learn two languages. They learned to inhabit two completely different ways of being human. Language isn't just vocabulary and grammar. It's a lens through which we see reality, organize our thoughts, and construct our identities. When you grow up with two radically different lenses, especially unusual pairs that rarely interact, you develop this unique cognitive flexibility that becomes your superpower. Research shows that bilinguals, especially those with typologically different language pairs, have enhanced executive function, better problem-solving skills, and increased cognitive reserve as they age. But beyond the science, there's something deeply human about these stories. Each person I spoke with described feeling like a bridge, someone who can see both sides of chasms that others don't even know exist. They carry within them the possibility of connection across vast linguistic and cultural divides. So here's what I want you to take away from this. The next time you meet someone who's bilingual, especially in an unusual combination, ask them about their experience. You'll discover that language isn't just a tool for communication. It's a fundamental part of who we are. These unusual language pairs create individuals with perspectives that the world desperately needs. People who can think across boundaries and see solutions where others see only differences. If you found these stories as fascinating as I did, do me a favor. Drop a comment below telling me if you grew up bilingual or if you know someone with an unusual language pair. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you want more content exploring the curious and unexpected aspects of language, culture, and human experience, hit that subscribe button and join the Curious Route community. We're just getting started on this journey, and I promise you, there are so many more extraordinary stories to uncover together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.